Welcome to Access to Analytics, the show where we discuss everything data and access to data.
Hello, everybody, to this new episode of Access to Analytics. Today, I have the pleasure to present my new guest, which I already know for a while. He's an independent data strategist. He's seen many data projects within Belgium, brings a lot of experience. So I'm really proud to announce Jan Meskens. Jan, how are you doing?
Manas, fine, thank you.
We've chatted a bit up front. You stated I can tell a bit about the customers which I've seen. So maybe from a general point of view, which kind of use cases do you guide at customers?
The type of use cases is mainly twofold. On the one hand, I'm guiding customers who are really in the beginning of exploiting data. So they are building or looking for tools to create insights from data, looking for the whole roadmap processes, how to manage change, and so on. On the other hand, I'm also working on more major projects where there is already a decent setup and they would like to add a specific use case and to see how could this use case bring value or how could we implement such thing that can help us and how can we combine tools together. And it's mostly in a process-oriented role, bridging or making bridges between, on the one hand, technology and business on the other hand.
Can you imagine there's a distinction within the maturity of the company you're guiding depending on projects? One are taking the first steps, one are already further down the road?
Yes, indeed. That's a good distinction.
Does that also impact the kind of data they're using, or do you typically see everyone already in the beginning wants to use PII data because that's cool? Or
yeah, that depends actually. I strongly believe in a logical approach. If you don't have a lot of experience, start with some low-hanging fruit to test how you can bring things together and how you can transform your first pieces of data. But I see often that companies are already thinking 2 or 3 steps further, and they are already thinking about, and we have sensor data or we have document data which we need to scrape and so on. So the ambitions can be equally high, but in less major companies, I believe in doing something more straightforward in the beginning and then grow fast.
Are there 1 or 2 projects you can share with us, things that you've seen being developed?
Yeah, you mean being developed as a use case or as a platform, or
more as a use case indeed?
More as a use case. I think the first use case is about applying artificial intelligence. That's at Port of Antwerp. A big project I'm working on today. We did implement an algorithm that predicts how many tugboats you need when a ship enters the harbor. That's actually a very specific process, but bringing a tugboat to a ship is a very time-consuming process. So if you have a bad estimate that you need 2 tugboats instead of 1, a ship has to wait, then a queue exists, and everything slows down. And now with an artificial intelligence algorithm, we can predict this very accurately. We see that people who plan the tugboats also want to adopt this algorithm because that's the last step, but also a very important step. So that's a very specific use case where we apply data science or artificial intelligence capabilities to a specific process. And you have the technical part, but you have the complete change part and so on. Other projects are more oriented towards reporting. Those are very frequently asked. And that can be, for example, very manual processes where people bring data from different systems together in a simple Excel sheet, but an Excel sheet from hell, I call it, which you have to maintain or do a lot of maintenance, and it's only in the head of one employee in a company. Automating those flows, it's not that sexy as an artificial intelligence flow, but there's still a lot of value in it, because then you have a reporting flow which is very straightforward, which can be maintained centrally, and you can build on it. You can extend it further. You can give free time to people who need to maintain all those things manually.
Those two use cases are quite different. If I think to an AI use case, probably the output, as you were saying, is used by a few people. They don't get access to the data underneath, but just to the output. It's one or two tugboats, as you were describing. Whereas the report, suddenly you create a replacement of this Excel from hell. But you need to start thinking who requires this data, what are they using it for, and stuff like that. That's probably also process-wise quite different to get this installed.
Process-wise different, but both are products. But the first one, where we talk about an AI algorithm, that's often in many cases, if you have an AI algorithm in an operational process, you try to embed it in the operational tooling, so that an end user who is interested in it does not need to open a secondary application or a secondary report and so on. So actually that's also a kind of the value, but also kind of the complexity for the implementation, because you bridge different technology stacks. You have your data platform stack, your application stack, bring those together and so on. So that's actually with the end user in mind, that you select the best product. For a report, then you're talking about a separate application, a reporting or dashboarding application, where your end users de facto need to work with. They need to consume their results over there. Right now, they're also doing this in a separate Excel sheet. So actually, there it makes sense to bring up an additional tool. If you would like to automate processes with AI or with some other tooling, then I prefer to integrate it directly into the application. And that defines all thinking work you do, the process you follow, how you prototype things, how you test it, and so on.
My own history, again, you were referring to Excel from hell. Getting people from one reporting tool to a different one is already a hard thing, because you require change. Excel, on the other hand, is more like a religion, and convincing them to stop using Excel and go to a more dashboarding, reporting environment. Think about the Tableaus, the Clicks, the Looker of this world. That's even something else. So maybe a bit of a side question, but how do you convince people to move from one tool to the other?
I learned not to convince them to move from the one tool to another, because some shadow Excel might exist always. So I say Excel from hell. Actually, Excel is not the baddest tool. It's very flexible. You can do a lot of calculations immediately, give inputs, see outputs, see how everything changes. So there's a reason why people use Excel. When can I convince them, or when can I show value about another tool? If there's really a bunch of work, which costs a lot of work for them every day, every week, to split that off in a separate tool, that they have some free time to do other things. Those other things can be creating new Excels, but that's the same process. They learn to crunch data, what's the value in data, how to bring things together, and at a certain moment we can move on to another tool, because up to now you have a lot of reporting tools and you can do a lot of stuff, but the ultimate flexibility of Excel, I didn't see it in any of those tools. So I cannot say I replace your Excel. I just replace part of the work you're doing in Excel and give you some free time.
You're right there. There's no other tool reaching the flexibility standards of Excel, but it's the management process upfront, the repeatability of getting your data there, the scalability of sharing your data across the organization while knowing who got which version of the truth. It's the management component that is indeed maybe harder to manage. And if
Indeed.
Excel is then your own output, where you still again benefit from the flexibility, that's definitely very important to keep, probably.
Yeah, indeed. That's how it works, and also you have reporting tools that also provide integration with your spreadsheet, where you can consume your results immediately in your favorite spreadsheet tool, and there you can go a step further, and you can add additional data. I see it as a testing process. You get insights, you get a better view on your real data, and that makes it easier later on for people who would like to automate this flow.
Let's go back a bit to the examples. I assume when you're talking about the Port of Antwerp use case, it's real-time data, at least some of the data you require in real time to make your prediction. Of course, your model will benefit from historical data, whereas reporting is mostly on batch data, or you also have experience with streaming reports?
Mostly it's batch data, the reporting flows. We have some cases with streaming data, but in many cases, those are niche examples, because I believe in streaming reports, but then that requires to have a vision that you put down everything as a streaming data platform, as a streaming architecture, and that you can bring in data in a streaming way. If you do both, or if you have a completely batch-based architecture, and then you implement a small streaming line or a small example, that's more difficult to maintain. So customers in the beginning of a process who have a clear view and clear requirements on why is streaming necessary, then we can go on that path. Otherwise, we have to make the trade-off. Can we work with micro batches, for example? Not a daily batch, but a batch every 15 minutes, every half hour. That can also already bring enough value on the short term. Installing a completely streaming application and streaming reporting platform, that's, for me at least, the exception up till today.
The key element you said there is think wisely about the necessity. Do you really need it? We have a common background at an energy supplier. One of the things they said, if people look to the price page of the website, that's an indicator they might churn, might terminate their contract. That's actually true, but it's fine to know that even one day later and send your marketing impression only then, rather than doing it real time and requiring this complexity. Whereas there are use cases where you truly require such a streaming service. So I think you really stressed correctly. It's about the necessity of the purpose.
Indeed. I think in most projects, because I always ask the question, how fresh do you need your data? And the starting answer is always within microseconds we need it. But then you start to think, when will you use it? What will be the added value of doing it every microsecond? And if that makes sense, we build something like a streaming architecture to bring it on. But in many cases, you build something that is too expensive for which value it can bring.
Rather than dividing data in streaming and batch, if we talk about sensitivity, what kind of data are you used to working with? It's PII, customer data, financial transaction data.
In the projects I'm currently working in, it's a bit divided. Finance is always an important customer, so that's a bit managed with personal data or more sensitive data. But their main goal is to bring finance numbers insightful, so we can shield that a bit, that you have aggregates of your data instead of all personal data inside it. The real data about customers and so on, that's for very specific use cases. And if you compare it with, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, while we were still together on a project, there is a lot of more to do on which data of customers you may distribute or not. So actually, it's more or less giving less data about customers, but only the really specific thing we need. On the other hand, a lot of data I'm working with now is process data. Logs of systems, logs of sensors, a lot of technical data which is being generated by IoT systems and so on. There you have less restrictions. There the volume is more a difficulty to deal with. If you would like to create a report with billions of records that are logged in one day, a measurement every second, then you have to think, how can we deliver this? Do we deliver this in a more aggregate way, and so on? So actually, you are using the same techniques, but for another problem.
And probably that also impacts who can access certain data, because if you're talking about aggregates, both from a personal identifiable field as from a large set of data, aggregates is probably fine to offer to more people, whereas the specific information you need to shield properly, that not everyone has access, either because it's not compliant or because people still write select star queries and raising a huge cost.
That's exactly the point. So the aggregates are less sensitive. If you would like to know what's the complete cost of something regarding people and so on, you can aggregate this. But if you know it by employee or by customer or so on, that's another story. So there it's very limited approach, or a very limited public which may use it. And often this is not done in the data platform itself, but it's solved in the operational systems, where you already have a very niche amount of people who can access it over there. So that's the trade-off. Do we need to load this data into our complete platform, or can we fix it at source level, where the people who are already working with this data and already have the ability to do this, can we give them a bit more to see the real operational report and the aggregates and the integration with other systems? That's something we do in the data platform then.
Quite interesting discussion. You're talking indeed on which reporting capabilities should be included in your operational system and which reports should be in your analytical data landscape. And if I understand you correctly, you state the answer is somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Basic operational reports belong in your operational system, and it's analytical purposes that you handle in your analytical data landscape.
If that's possible to reach, then I prefer that. The same like operational lists. Exporting a list out of your operational system, actually you shouldn't need a reporting system or a data platform for that, because no one will be happy then. You see something on your screen in your operational system, there's no export possibility, so you go to another application. There you try to mimic the list that you see in your original user interface, and you export it, and there will always be something that goes wrong because it's another timestamp that you collected, or the calculation is a bit different, and so on. So I think people get happy from doing it in their operational system, and that's our real operational reports. And if you can achieve this in the operational system from a usability perspective, that would be very interesting, I think.
While having such a division, that also means that your data lives in your operational system where it actually lived anyway, but it's also accessible there. Next to that, it's accessible in your analytical data landscape, which probably at least consists of a data warehousing technology or a storage technology and a reporting tool. So data is accessible through multiple systems. How do you define who can access what across all these systems?
Actually, it's not one way to handle this in the projects I'm working in. If you talk about an operational system, if you're talking about your analytical system, usually those are two ways to access your data, two tools, two databases, two I don't know what, and also two processes. In most cases, your operational system, that's very conservative. They shield almost everything, and it's only the user interface of the operational system through which you can access data, and you use the access management that's built in that system. The database itself is shielded, and only for some technical reasons someone can enter the database to do a fix or something like that. On the other hand, if you have your analytical landscape, there we have another type of access management depending on the role of someone in an organization. We give them access to certain parts of the data. So someone with a certain role needs to see finance data, for example, of a certain part of an organization. Then we give them also the analytical role to see this data. So actually we mimic the roles someone has in the organization in the data landscape. But that's always a hard part to solve, because people want to see just a bit more. They're not in the right role in their organization. How can we mimic that then, and so on? So it's best effort to do this, and we do it mostly very conservative, certainly for sensitive data. But yeah, it's a process that makes it hard to tackle.
That's quite clear. Then, on the other hand, if you want to get access to something new, how does that work? You can go request someone, or
two ways. If you enter an organization as someone new, I think in many organizations, a new employee is configured as a lookalike of an existing employee. We say, hey, Wannes, new employee in our company, he has to have the same access as Jan. And then this mimics, and we enter some things. So that's the first point, where also mistakes can originate from, because are you exactly the same lookalike as the one that you're supposed to be? And that's almost never the case. There are always exceptions. So that's the first part, and that's a pretty hard part, because it's not really visible. It are mostly a bunch of Active Directory groups that are migrated from A to B, and then that works out. So there you need some manual intervention to be sure and to confirm all those accesses. Do we still need to migrate them, and so on? On the other hand, if you would like to see some data, we often work with a normal ticketing tool, where you enter a ticket to a service desk. The service desk has some kind of a security matrix, which is defined, and let's hope that matrix is still actual. Based on that matrix, they make the first investigation. Can someone access it or not? And in case of doubt, they contact someone who should know it better. And contacting someone who should know it better is difficult. So that depends. If there's clear data ownership, they can contact the data owner. Otherwise, they can contact an application owner, a team lead, and so on. But that part is often pretty hard.
You had a very elaborate and very interesting answer here, focusing both on granting someone new access via the principle of configuring like a lookalike. And I have some questions about that later on as well, but also about the ticketing service for new requests, and indeed who needs to approve that it's fine if service desk doesn't know by default. You were stating if there's data ownership, you can go there. Where does data ownership belongs to you?
For me, that's key in a data landscape, because it solves a lot of issues that you have while working with data. Where does it belong? It belongs to the business. Business has to be owner of the data, and IT teams or IT people are just supporting to make things possible. And if there's clear business ownership, you have someone who you can go to and ask questions about the underlying data. And that helps to create better insights, to do better things with data. Right now, there is often, in many organizations, there is no clear ownership of data. Yeah, and then you start to make assumptions. And making assumptions, then you often end up with things who don't represent the reality of a certain part of data. So if business has clear ownership of data and they have the availability to ask questions about the data and so on, you can do a lot more than do it solely into an IT-related discipline.
You made also the very clear distinction, as in you log a ticket, service desk can handle. Only when you need approval, you go through the data owner. Should we also enable data owners to take this into their own hands?
Yes, if that's possible, I would say yes. Then you don't need a service desk. If you ask a question, if you ask or you enter a request to access a certain part of data, actually the tool should immediately see who is the owner of the data and route it to that person who should approve or not.
What is required to enable them? You were already talking about its Active Directory groups. I know some companies are managing access through Terraform. Those are things that a data owner, a business expert owning certain data is not able to cope with. So how can we still enable them data owners to take the rights into their own hands?
Yeah, simplicity and usability. Make it simple for them and usable. If they need to enter code or they need to do some things like that, that wouldn't work. If it's just approving, pressing on a button, that could work. And if it's embedded in their usual tools, then they will do it. Because each step it takes, or each additional step, will make it more difficult, and then you will need to wait to get access to your data. So it's actually a benefit of both the requester and the data owner that this flow is kept as simple as possible.
Kept as simple as possible and integrated within their daily workflow.
Indeed.
I'll go back to your very interesting answer. You were stating there as well that quite often new people get access to this is a lookalike. That's actually a process I've seen in larger enterprises as well. And then people give a lookalike who has shifted throughout the years to multiple departments, hence having too much access already by default, now also being granted to the newcomer. Is that something you've already seen as well?
That's actually right, the thing that I wanted to say. You think you're hiring a lookalike, but due to the career of someone in an organization migrated from role to role, and the rights shifted from one role to another role, then you give people too many things. It's no longer a lookalike. It's actually very difficult to state person A is a lookalike of person B if person B has more than you think.
Just thinking a bit conceptually, I still believe correctly it's a lookalike. The first one has too much. He shifted
Indeed,
responsibilities, which require a cleanup. Have you seen successful access cleanup projects, or have you actually seen cleanup projects? Maybe
those are not the popular projects. I've seen cleanup actions. I'm not gonna say projects, but all actions that ask people, do you still need this? Those are unsuccessful because, I will also answer yes. There's one reason why I might need it one day. If you can or have a flexible way to turn off certain access because you see people don't use it anymore. People don't go to a certain piece of data or a certain report for several months. You can turn off access, and one day, if they would like to re-access this, and you can give them access within 10 minutes, let's say, then there's no problem to turn down or to stop certain access to data. But in most cases, this is not the real world today, because granting access to some part of data or some part of a system always takes too much time. And that's why people would like to keep all their original accesses and so on.
I think there's two key elements in what you're stating there. Your process needs to be simple and fast, and you were already referring to it. Should be integrated with the daily workflow of the data owner. But you also should be able to take away based on insights, on usage insights, and those as well are not easy to find, probably.
No, I strongly believe in integrating metadata for that. A lot of systems have metadata about who enters which or who sees which data, who sees which report and so on. But bringing all those metadata together in something insightful is the hardest part. There is metadata, but not very usable today.
If I try to add up everything you're stating, you want to have metadata, you want to have insights in what is happening, you formulated a clear vision on a process, a single approval, maybe sometimes even a second approval, but which automatically implement based in. So you have a clear vision on where you would like to go to standardize providing access to someone. What prevents you from getting there at your customers?
That's a good question, because if you say it like this,
why am I very short? But I know
it's why am I not doing it? That's actually because it's something that crosses a lot of borders in an organization. It's a part. It's usually a kind of an IT responsibility, the real core IT responsibility, those working on a service desk and so on. On the other hand, it's a data responsibility, the business part of the data, and as well the data platform part or the technical part of your data. And there's also the end user application part, where we have to do something. And bringing all those things together to do something around access, that should be the case, and that should be actually a way to implement those things. But yeah, we all like to think about the part we are working on, working solely on the data platform, working solely on the end user application and so on. But bridging this complete gap and installing a quite simple process to simplify everything, that's hard to bring all those things together, as well as in technical disciplines, as in people disciplines, roles, and so on.
Stated like this, indeed, it sounds way more complex than the summary I made. And I think you're right. It's both a technical challenge, it's a process challenge, and it's a collaboration challenge, probably.
Yeah, and to start a project like that, you have to be aware of the cost it takes today to give people access and who are all the people working with access, as well as which issues there are with data access today. And if you can make this insightful, then you can write a proposal or make a proposal on doing it better. And now everyone knows that there might be something wrong with the access management, but to quantify that and to make that really insightful, that would help to bring people together and to do better.
Maybe even coming back to your data strategy at a beginning customer, it's about having the low-hanging insights first to start getting better along the way and start doing the more complex stuff or simplifying the more complex stuff.
That might be a good case to do that. But also if you do the first low-hanging fruit at the beginning, already take data access into account. because skipping some things cannot be skipping data accessibility. Because if you would like to grow, you need to have a strategy to give people access. How do we usually do this? Is looking like what's the current state of accessibility to data, to systems, and so on in an organization, and we work further on that one. Maybe at the beginning, this can already be an interesting point, is the way how we give access to certain parts of software in the organization, the right way to do it anyway. Can't we take it into account when building some new data platform to also shift to some other type of access management system? That might be an interesting case to think about, or to do a proof of concept with it or something.
You're stating do that in the beginning. Maybe, probably, just thinking for myself, probably not first. You want to have shown the value from data, but then one of the first things afterwards to grow your platform.
Indeed, because if you don't have any accessibility, you cannot grow. You have to have some maintainable thing that manages your data accessibility. So in one of your first parts, I agree, first you show value and so on. But if you start to industrialize more and more, I think accessibility and security is a core component, because if you don't implement it the right way, you will not get the value that you want.
Final question from my side then. Do you then see you had a very conservative approach on granting access. If you have something in place, do you then see this shifting a bit more from the purely compliance point of view to more innovative point of view, that you can more balance them together?
I think so, because if you have something more flexible, you can still be conservative, but for example, play with time of access. Right now, you ask to access certain part of the data, and it looks like you're asking this forever. But in a more flexible approach, you could ask to access a piece of data which you only need the next week for a proof of concept. That's another case. You can say, okay, for 1 week, you can get access to that piece of data because there's a certain reason for that. It's a temporal role. You would like to test it to proof of concept and so on. So that stimulates innovation right then. And afterwards, we roll back that, or that grants, those grants are rolled back. So it's actually possible to stimulate innovation and still being conservative.
Need an approach. I've heard that one of the largest enterprises in the world as well, where they state if you ask access for 1 or 2 weeks for investigation purposes, is there any value in the data? That's a very low approval process. Of course, a bit depending on the sensitivity of the data. Whereas if you ask this for a longer period in time or for a repeatable use case, indeed, it becomes a more heavy process. On the other hand, to give another example in the same sphere, you also notice that people are thinking about the concept of promising access but not granting it at once. You were stating, for example, the databases of the operational systems. There's only a few, probably IT administrators, having access, because when something happens, they need to have access. If you promise it to them but don't have it installed, your risk is very low. And if they then indeed have a process where in minutes they have access to still debug something, you've limited your blast radius, but still have a process to resolve when needed.
That would also work in that context. An alternative that I've seen a few times is the data lab approach. If you are in a kind of a cloud setup, you spin up a data lab environment with some data on it, where someone can start crunching data, see is there value in it, and automatically you destroy the lab in 3 weeks or something. So all data, everything is in the virtual lab that is created. And after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you shut down everything, you clear up everything, so the data also disappears. But that's actually a workaround for the real problem. You're doing something very complex. to giving someone temporal access to data. If you could build it in the core of your organization, that would make more sense.
If I try to summarize what you were stating the entire session, you were talking about multiple use cases where necessity comes first, either by having machine learning algorithms, having an output to operational systems, or reporting services, batch streaming, whatever, but always think, why are you doing something? And then later on, you start also thinking about who can access certain data. Again, you know why it's there, so it's easier to define. And there you really need to try to shift responsibility to data owners by offering them a less technical, complex solution integrated within their workflow so that they can take it into their own hands. But you also should be able to give a kind of observability, who has access to this. And then maybe what we're talking now at the end is guiding them to some best practices, time-bound access only for a few weeks on whatever solution, maybe this data lab solution, maybe a different kind of way. So it's a long process to get there, to try to have a simplified access management process to enable you to balance compliance and innovation, where you currently see at customers still way often a compliance approach to data.
I think that's a good summary, and maybe one thing to add, because we are now always talking, or I am mostly talking about conservative approaches, and people may not see certain data. But on the other hand, if you don't have a decent access management policy, then you can end up with a data platform where people cannot see anything they need. And then you invested a lot of money in building up something completely new, and due to bad access management, you cannot access what you need. And that's a pity, because it's only giving access, but that can become way too complex at the end, because you don't have a good overview on who may see what, that your complete project, you risk to fail in your project then.
I think you indeed already mentioned it's about getting your data use cases being used. And access management is a key element to get your data being used. If you take the completely compliant approach, no one has access, but you're doing your use case for nothing.
Indeed.
Found it very interesting having you, Jan. Again, learned a lot. Was also nice seeing you again. So I would definitely like to thank you for participating in this Access to Analytics series.
Thank you for the invitation, Wannes. I found it very interesting also to see how you summarize my answer and to bring a bit more structure into it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.